In this lesson, I'm going to show you a nice clever trick how to create a dotted line in Adobe Illustrator. Now, unlike programs like InDesign where you can actually create a dotted line, Illustrator doesn't allow you to do this. You can create dashed lines, but not lines that are comprised of dots. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our line segment tool and holding Shift, draw a straight line. And let's just make this black. And let's bring the weight up to 30. Okay. And now we're going to tick the dashed line box. And as you can see, we get something that looks like that. So now if we set our dash to 0 and our gap to 40, and then we select our cap and change that to round cap, we get our dotted line. And you can select this again and you can adjust the gap to 100. And it will space the dots even further apart. And if I zoom out and lengthen the line, you'll see that it keeps all the dots, and the dots will just continue to go as long as the line. We could bring that down to say 60. And you can adjust the width like that. Or similarly, you can create a shape, and it will also work, and it will apply the dots to the outside of the shape. And here you can switch between these two different options that just control how it handles corners. So this option on the right that I've just selected ensures that a dot is in every corner, whereas this one rounds them off a little bit. Okay, there you go. That's a cheeky way how to create a dotted lines in Adobe Illustrator. Hi there, my name's Daniel Saunders, and in this course I'm going to be expanding your knowledge of Adobe Illustrator with some really useful shortcuts, tricks and tips. We're going to be covering things like how to draw basic and advanced shapes, creating and working with paths and masks, looking at ways in which we can modify text, and some other cool effects. Throughout the course of my professional career that began in 2006, I've learned a whole range of useful tricks and tips in Adobe Illustrator. And that's essentially why I created this course, to share some of these tips with others who are on the same journey in developing their design skills. So please feel free to get in touch if you have any questions or comments, and I'll be here to help right alongside you. Should we get started? In this lesson, we're going to be looking at the basic shapes in Adobe Illustrator, and it's really important to get a good understanding of these at this stage because we will be using them later in the course to create more advanced shapes. Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to be looking briefly at the line segment tool, the arc tool, the rectangle tool, rounded rectangle tool, ellipse tool, polygon tool, and star tool. Okay, so let's start with the line segment tool. You can left click on the artboard and drag to create a straight line, and you can also left click and then hold Shift to create a straight horizontal line, or a line at 45 degrees, or a completely vertical line if you wish. Similarly to the line segment tool, you've got the arc tool, so you can left click and drag to create a curve, or you can create a nice even curve by holding Shift. Next we have the rectangle tool. You can left click on the artboard and drag to create any four-sided shape, or you can hold Shift and do the same again to create a square, or you can left click anywhere on the artboard and you can specify your own width and your own height. Click OK and it will create the shape for you. Similarly to the rectangle tool, we've got the rounded rectangle tool. If I left click and create this, you'll see that the corners are rounded off. So if I left click on the artboard, I can specify a corner radius of, let's say, 10, and a width of 500, and a height of 400. And you'll see that the corners are quite small. If I create that same shape again, 500 width, 400 height, and create the corner radius of 50, Next we've got the ellipse tool. You can left click and drag to create an ellipse, or you can hold shift and create a perfect circle. Next we have the polygon tool. Now you can left click on the artboard and you can specify the number of sides. So let's say 5 to create a pentagon with a radius of 200 pixels. Okay, so we've got our pentagon. Then you can do the same again, but change the number of sides to 6, and it will create a hexagon. And you can do the same again, and let's put 8 in to create an octagon. And you can do this for any number of sides that you like. And lastly, we've got the star tool. So we can left click on the artboard, specify our radius 1 and radius 2. Now these are the innermost and outermost points of the star we're going to create. So if we leave them at 25 and 50 pixels, and we're going to have 5 points on this star, and click OK, we create something that looks like a very typical star. Now, if we create the same star again, but we enter 20 points, you'll see that it looks quite different now. And now what I'm going to do to give you a comparison is I'm going to create the same star again, but we're going to change radius 1 and radius 2. So let's bring radius 2 up to 40 pixels. So the difference between radius 1 and radius 2 is considerably less. Okay, so now you can see that the points themselves are much less pronounced than in the original star we created. And again, you can do this with any number of points that you like. Okay, that's the end of this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you how to draw our own heart in Illustrator. Okay, so first we're going to grab the ellipse tool, and we're going to left click on the artboard and create an ellipse with a width of 100 and a height of 100 pixels. And we're going to swap around the fill and the stroke here. So the fill is black and there is no stroke. Then what we're going to do is select this, and we're going to go edit, copy, edit, paste in place. So it pastes this shape in exactly the same place. And then holding shift, we're going to drag it along like so, to about there. And the reason we hold shift is so it drags it perfectly horizontally. Now we're going to create a rectangle. And to start with, you can just draw any rectangle you like. It doesn't matter what size. If you go up to view, and just make sure that you've got your smart guides turned on. And what smart guides are, as you can see, these green guides that are appearing that just help you line shapes up. So very, very handy. So it's always good to keep those on. What we're going to do now is we're going to drag this rectangle so the left edge lines up with the middle of the circle on the left. Okay? And you can see it's lined up with the green smart guides. So that's fine. And then we're just going to drag it down so it lines up with the top. And then I'm just going to increase the height here. So just drag that down so it snaps to the bottom. Then what I'm going to do is just click on the rectangle again and just drag it out to the right so it lines up with the middle of the right circle. Now a really handy thing to know is if you press Command Y on Mac or Control Y on PC, you'll be able to see all the lines and the anchor points that make up the shapes that you're creating. So you can see here that everything lines up, and then you can press it again to switch back. So now what we want to do is we want to group these three shapes into one shape. So I'll switch back to this view again so you can see. We're going to select all three of those shapes. We're going to go up to the Pathfinder palette on the right, and then we're going to click the top left one, Unite. And as you can see, that will make it into one shape. If you did this in the other view, so I'm just going to go back a step. If if you select all three shapes there and you do the same again, you won't see any difference because they're all black. But doing it this way, you can see that they've all merged to form one shape. Okay, so what we want to do now is, if we get the rotate tool over here and just holding shift, rotate it, and it should snap to 45 degrees. Then we're going to go up to edit, copy, and then edit, paste in place. And then we're going to go to object, transform, and reflect. Make sure it's reflecting along the vertical axes and click OK. And it should reflect it on the spot. Now, what we're going to do, you should be able to see, following my mouse here, this is where our heart is going to be. Okay. So this bit here, this is the dip. So now we can adjust the dip of our heart. So this is the one we've just created. So there's quite a low dip there on the heart. If I select all of this and hold Alt and Shift, Shift to keep it horizontally in line and Alt to create a copy. Okay, we can move one of these shapes a bit closer like this. And as you can see, the dip in our heart is now a lot shallower. And you can play around with this until you get something you're happy with. But I think this one on the right, that's more the heart shape that I'm looking for in this video. Okay, so let's switch back to our other view. That's what it looks like. But now what we need to do is we need to trim off this bottom left and these bottom right shapes. So if I select one of these, then let's make it red so we can see what's happening. Okay, we're going to select both of them and go up to the Pathfinder palette again. We're going to click on this bottom left one here. Okay, so now it looks like nothing's changed, but actually if I select up here the direct select tool, I can now pull these elements apart. So where those lines all overlapped, it effectively breaks those into individual shapes and allows you to do different things with them. So let's just select this bottom left one, and you can hit delete, and the bottom right one and hit delete. And if we go back to the other view, you can see this is the shape we're left with, made up of 3 parts. And again, as we did before, we can select all of these parts, go to the Pathfinder palette and click Unite. And now I've finished, I can make this black again and just bring that up in size. And there we go, we've created our heart. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you how to create a symmetrical shield in Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so we're going to create this in 2 parts. We're going to select our pen tool, and what we're going to do is, because it's a symmetrical shape, we're going to create the left-hand side, and then we're simply going to copy that and merge it into one complete shape. So if we left-click on the artboard, and then left click and hold it and drag. So we're going to create a curve like this. And we can just switch these around. So swap the fill and the stroke so we can see the shape we're creating. So as you can see here, it naturally wants to continue with a curve. If you hold down the Alt key and left click on this anchor point, it will force that to cut off, and then you can start with a straight point. So we're going to hold shift to create our next part at 45 degrees and left click. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to left click and drag and bring this in. And then we're going to let it carry on with the curve. So just bring this just a bit further out here. Left click and drag like so. And then we're going to come back in. And then we're just going to let this curve dip somewhere around here. And then we're just going to hold Alt and left click just to cut that one off there. Okay, so you can see here I've overshot it a little bit and this one is too long now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the pen tool and the add anchor point tool. And I'm going to go along here. You can see with the smart guides, it snaps into place. And what I'm going to do is go to View, Show Rulers, drag out from the left. There we go. And create a guide that lines up with this endpoint. And I've just zoomed in here. And then selecting this, I'm going to go back and grab our add anchor point tool, and I'm just going to add an anchor point on that line. So effectively you're adding another point after you've pen tooled already. Okay, so now we can select this endpoint with our direct selection tool over here, and we can just hit delete and it will just trim that one off. Then we can go up to View and hide our rulers, and go up to View and hide our guides as well. We're finished with that for the time being. Then selecting our pen tool again, we can click on this point to activate it. Okay, and as you can see now, we can carry on where we left off. So let's just zoom out a little bit. And now, as you can see here, next to the pen tool icon there's a little circle. That implies that if I click now, it will complete the shape. So now what we want to do, we've got the left half of our shield, we want to mirror this on the right. So if we select the whole thing, swap the fill and the stroke around, and then we can go to Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Place, and then Object, Transform, Reflect, and make sure you reflect it along the vertical axis. Then if you hold Shift to drag it along, with the smart guides still selected, you should see it snap in place like so. Then if we go to the other view with Command Y on the Mac, Control Y on the keyboard, you'll be able to see that it's still made up of two parts. And we can just select both of those, go over to the Pathfinder, and then click on Unite. And there we go, we've created our shield. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you how to create a settings cog that you might see on a lot of websites in Adobe Illustrator. And this typically symbolizes setting options or preferences. Okay, so we're going to select our ellipse tool, we're going to hold Shift, and we're going to draw a perfect circle. We're then going to switch the fill and the stroke, and then we're going to increase the weight. Your weight might be slightly different depending on how big your artboard is and how big you're creating your cog. Let's make that a bit bigger, I think. Okay, so now we're going to create the spokes on our cog. So if we select the rectangle tool and just drag and create a square, holding Shift. So it's remembered the stroke that we just created our circle with, so we're just going to swap these around. So this is a fill rather than a stroke. And then what we're going to do is select with the direct selection tool these top two anchor points here. And we're going to get our scale tool and just holding Shift, we're just going to drag those in. Okay, so this is the shape for our spokes on our cog. and we've still got our smart guides turned on, hopefully, so you can see here it's trying to snap to all different elements. But what we want to do is snap it right to the middle of the circle, so it lines up vertically. And we can just bring it up so it just pokes out the top like this. And what we're going to do is going to go to Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste in Place. And then we're going to go to Object, Transform, and Reflect. And we're going to reflect along the horizontal axis this time. Click OK, and we can just drag that down. Now, you can probably tell from looking at this that this one is sticking out a bit further than the one at the bottom. So we want to make sure that they're both evenly spread out. So if we select both of these, holding Shift, we're going to go Object, and we're going to group them. So then if we click that, and we click our circle, we get these options up here. And you can also access them via the Align palette on the right. And we're just going to click this one here, Vertical Line Center. And you can see it just shuffles them into place, and now they're evenly sticking out the edge of the circle. And we can actually go back and Object and ungroup these now. Next, what we're going to do is select both of these. Now we know that they're positioned correctly and equally. And then we're going to go to Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Place. We're going to select the Rotate tool, and we're going to hold Shift and rotate them 90 degrees. Then what we're going to do is select all 4 of these spokes, and we're going to go to Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Place, select the Rotate tool, and do the same again, but just for 45 degrees this time. Okay, so there we go, we have our cog. The last thing we need to do now, if I select all of this, and using the scale tool, shrink it down, you'll see it does something quite strange. So if we press Command Y on the Mac or Control Y on the PC, we can see that these are all shapes, but this line is still a stroke. So what we need to do, if we select that and go to Object, Expand, and make sure that Stroke is selected, it will then convert the stroke or the outline into a shape. So if we click OK, there we go. So you can see now that it's become the shape as we saw it, rather than an outline. So now you can't easily adjust that width anymore. But if you select all the parts of this shape and shrink them down, it will remain proportionate to the other parts of the shape. And that's just best practice really to finish off when you've completed designing an icon or a shape. And the last thing really is to just select all of these, as we've done in previous lessons, go to the Pathfinder palette and then unite them so that becomes one complete shape. And there we go, we've created our settings cog. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you how to create a volume or speaker symbol in Adobe Illustrator. So first, we're going to grab our rectangle tool and create a four-sided shape that looks something like this. Next, we're going to select that and go to Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste in Place. And hopefully you've still got your smart guides turned on, and we're just going to drag that out, holding Shift, just so it snaps in place nicely. Let's just make this part a different color as well, just while we do the lesson. Okay, so now we're going to select, with our direct selection tool, we're just going to select these 2 points here on the right hand side, and using the scale tool and holding Shift, we're going to drag up. And as you can see, this is starting to create our speaker. So we're just going to select them again, And then you can use the arrow keys, or you can hold shift and use the arrow keys to just tap these into place, or holding shift to do bigger increments. Okay, there we go. So that's looking about right for our speaker. And I can make that black again. Now next we're going to create the sound waves that are going to go over here on the right. So there's many ways to do this, but the way I like to do it is select the ellipse tool and hold shift to create a circle. And then using the direct selection tool, that's this one up here, you just simply select this left hand point and hit delete, and it will create a semicircle. And then from there, we just swap the fill and the stroke around and increase the weight to something like that. And this is a personal preference, but you can select it and you can change the cap to round cap at the end, and you'll see it just adds a rounded cap rather than a square edge to it. But for this lesson, I think we'll keep them square. Just make sure it lines up vertically there with the smart guides, and just bring it a bit closer. Now if I select the sound wave and go edit, and then edit paste in place, I can then hold shift and use the arrow keys just to tap it a little bit closer. And this one's going to be a bit smaller, so we're going to use the scale tool just to shrink this down. That's holding shift as well. And that's one of the benefits of keeping anything that is a stroke or an outline as a stroke or an outline, because when you shrink it down, it will remember the weight. So if I create a copy of this here, and I go to Object, Expand, as if I finished my shape, and then I shrink it down, as you can see, it doesn't remember that there's a stroke, and it will just scale that down. And we want these two sound waves to be the same weight. And I'm just going to bring that a bit closer so they line up. And they're a bit closer overall. Okay, so there we go. We've created our speaker icon. The last thing to do is to press Command Y on the Mac or Control Y on the PC. And as you can see, we just want to group these shapes. So we're going to go to the Pathfinder and then unite this speaker shape on the left. And then our sound waves on the right. We want to select those, go to Object, Expand, leave those ticked and click OK. There we go, so we can see the outline of our shapes now. And then what we want to do is select all of these, go to the Pathfinder palette, click Unite again. And there we go. We've created our speaker volume symbol. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you a really quick and cheeky way to create an infinity symbol in Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so if we select our text tool over here and just click anywhere on the artboard, we're going to go up to Type, Glyphs. Let's make this a bit bigger just so we can see more. Make sure you have Show Entire Font selected and just scroll down until you come across the infinity symbol. There we go. It's about halfway down on the right hand side. If you double click that, it will add it as part of your text, and then you can use the scale tool to bring that up. Now at the moment this is still a font, so what we can do is select it and go to Type and Create Outlines. And then if we press Command Y on Mac or Control Y on PC, you'll see, just like our other shapes that we've been creating, it's now a shape rather than a font. And even if you wanted to create a slightly different infinity symbol, this is a really handy way to at least have a starting point, and then you can pull these different points around to customize it as you like using the direct select tool. But essentially, that's the quick and easy way to create an infinity symbol. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at compound paths and clipping masks. So first, let's start with compound paths. So, in some of the previous videos, we've been looking at creating shapes and then selecting those shapes and using the Pathfinder palette and the Unite function, merging these shapes together like so. But what happens if we want these to be part of the same shape, but they don't touch or overlap in any way? So if I select both of these shapes, and I'll go over here and just click anywhere on the gradient. So you'll see it applies the gradient to each circle individually. So what if I want the gradient to run from one side to the other through both of these circles? That's where compound paths come in handy. So if I select both of these circles and holding Shift to drag straight up and Alt to create a copy, there we go. And now if I select them both again and go to Object, Compound Path, when I click Make, this is going to make both circles effectively one shape, even though we see them as two different shapes. So now you can see that the gradient runs through both of them. So if I select the right-hand circle with the direct selection tool and drag it closer, you'll see that it doesn't actually let me, because now it's recognized as one single shape, whereas before I could drag these around individually. This is now part of the same shape. So similarly, this could work the same with text. So if I just create a piece of text here, make it bold, and let's bring it up in size. And what I'm going to do is go to Type and Create Outlines. So now our text isn't text anymore, it's effectively a shape. And then I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to go to the Gradient palette, and I'm going to click the gradient. Okay, so you can see now it's done the same thing. It's applied the gradient individually to each letter, and that's not what we want. For this example, I want to run the gradient from black through to the light grey white on the other side of the whole word. So what we do is we just select our text, we go to Object, Ungroup. So now each of the letters are individually grouped rather than being grouped together as a word. And we go to Object, Compound Path, and click Make. And as you can see now, the text runs from the black on the right hand side through to the white, lighter grey colour on the left. And if you try with the direct select tool and individually select a letter, you'll again remember that it's effectively now one shape rather than being separate parts of a shape. And you can click it, go to Object, Compound Path, and Release. And when you do release compound paths, you do need to be careful, because you will sometimes get little oddities like this, which you can just click and then delete, but then it will delete it from the letter itself. So you've got to be careful. Although what you can do is, if you want to return this text how it was, so with the this part of the E being cut out so you can see the white through from the background, what you do is you simply select the inside, you select the outside as well, you go up to the Pathfinder palette and you click -back here. So this is the second one in on the top row. Okay? And that will effectively punch out that shape from the shape behind. And then we've got our text back to as we had it before. Okay, so now let's take a look at clipping masks. We're going to go to File, Place, and we're going to select our photo. And using the scale tool, let's just bring that down so we can see it on screen. Okay. So now I'm going to select the ellipse tool, and holding Shift, I'm going to create a circle. Let's just fill it with black for now. And I want this circle to be in the very center of the image. So we can simply select both of these, and we've got our align options along the top here, and we've also got them on the right. And I want to click on this one, horizontal align center, and then vertical align center. So now this circle is right in the middle of our image. Okay, now we're going to create our clipping mask. The shape that you want the image to be at the end needs to be on top. So I want this image to appear inside this circle shape. So I've got my circle on top. I will select both the image and the shape. I'll then go to Object, Clipping Mask, and click Make. Okay, so now you can see that the photograph is inside the circle itself. But what if I want to adjust the crop? Well, easy. We can just double click the image and then go inside, and you can drag this around as necessary. And you'll see up here it moves inside the group. So you can go back, and it's remembered the adjustment to the crop. And again, you can double click, you can go back in, you can straighten the crop back up, and then again you can click back and back again. Okay, and that's a little bit about compound paths and clipping masks in Adobe Illustrator. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you how you can add rounded corners to shapes that you've already created in Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so let's create a rectangle. You'll notice that we've got the rounded rectangle tool here, but for this, we're going to use the rectangle tool and just create a four-sided shape. Then selecting that, we're going to go up to Effect, down to Stylize, and then select Round Corners. And just tick the preview box on. And you'll see as we increase the radius, the corners get progressively more rounded. And we can click OK. And then if we press Command Y on the Mac or Control Y on the PC, you'll see that essentially it's still recognized as a rectangle. But what we're seeing is just the rounded corner effect. And you can see this in the appearance palette on the right. You can see we've got round corners listed. And one of the benefits of this is that you can click this and then go and edit this at a later date. And you can make it smaller or bigger. Or you can delete the effect entirely. Once you've finished and you're happy with the radius of your corners, you can, of course, let's switch back to this view so you can see, select your shape, go to Object, Expand Appearance, and then it will make this shape as you see it. And if you select it and go to the Appearance palette on the right, you'll see it's no longer listed as an editable option. And it's not just four-sided shapes you can do this with. If we select the star tool, and we'll create a star with 5 points. Let's create a very typical star. Okay, so we'll just select that. We'll go Effect, Stylize, Round Corners. And as you can see, you can just click and hold and see how the shape changes as you increase or decrease the radius. And you can do this for any shapes, and you can get some quite bizarre and unexpected results sometimes. Let's do one more. Let's do the polygon tool. So we'll create a hexagon. Then we'll go to Effect, Stylize, and Round Corners. Okay, so you'll see it start from square edges and they just get progressively rounder. And that's how you round off corners to existing shapes in Adobe Illustrator. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you how to add a reflection to an image. You can do this to shapes as well, but for this example, I'm going to be using a photo. So if we go up to File, Place, and select Photo from our user files, and we can place that into the document, just left click, and then using the scale tool, we'll just bring it down. There we go. Now what we want to do is left click the image, go Edit, Copy, Edit Paste in Place, and then Object, Transform, and Reflect along the horizontal axes. And with our smart guides still enabled, just drag it down until it snaps in place. So we should have something that looks like that. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is select the rectangle tool and create a rectangle. And if we press Command Y on the Mac or Control Y on the PC, you can see the outlines of where our photos sit. Let's just line that one up. So the black rectangle that we're creating just matches the size of the bottom photo. So you should have something that now looks like this. So what we're going to do next is select both the black rectangle and the upside down photograph underneath. Go to the transparency palette and click Make Mask, and we can untick Clip. Now next we want to make the mask itself active because we need to edit that. So at the moment you can see the orange outline here shows that the photo itself is being edited, so we just need to click there. Okay, so now we're working on the mask. So if we go to Gradient and then just click on here. Okay, so anywhere that's black effectively removes part of the image, anywhere that's white keeps part of the image. So if we change this to -90 degrees, you'll see here it's a bit more faded at the bottom and less faded at the top. So if I bring this up, so more black, it fades the bottom even more. And that's how you control how much reflection is going to be in your image. But why isn't the bottom totally invisible? It's still partly see-through. Well, that's because the black we're using isn't completely RGB black. So at the moment you can see the values here are 29, 29, 27. We need that to be all 0. Okay? You can see there it disappears. So if we create that as a new swatch, I didn't want to create that as a gradient swatch. What I want to do is deselect that, go in, and then edit this swatch itself. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my gradient and I'm going to drag this new pure black on top of here. Okay, so now as I adjust it, you can see it changes the reflection, and with the fully RGB black it now completely removes part of the image, whereas before it didn't have these 3 zeros here, and that's what you want, otherwise there's still going to be part of your image that's visible. So now we can adjust our image like so, and then you can move this slider along here to also control the location of the gradient and where it starts to fade out. And we can just click this to switch back to our simple view. And there you go, we've now got our image. And one last thing you can do is just select it at the bottom, go to transparency, and you can just reduce the opacity. So see, now it's reducing the opacity of the mask. What I've got to do is go back and select the image itself, then reduce the opacity. Otherwise it's going to reduce the opacity of the mask that we've created, and we want to keep that as we've edited it. So make sure that you have the image on the left selected when you want to finally reduce the transparency and fade out your reflection. Okay, and that's how you add a reflection to an image in Adobe Illustrator. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you how you can add texture to text or an image using opacity masks. So let's select our type tool, click, and let's type texture. And let's bring it up nice and big. We can leave this as editable text if we like, that's absolutely fine. So you may have your own texture now that you'd like to import if you know how to do that, but if you don't, Illustrator has some already preloaded. So you go over to Symbols and select this drop down in the top right, and then down to Open Symbol Library, and then Artistic Textures. And you'll see that you get this additional palette pop up. And there's a whole host of different textures here, and you don't have to select the artistic ones, but I think there's one in here called Charcoal that I can click and drag onto the artboard. Make this a little bit bigger with the scale tool, and you can see it's quite a nice texture for that weathered grunge look. And that's what I'm going for in this lesson. So at the moment that's a symbol, so if we go to Object and Expand, leave these two ticked and click OK. So now pressing Command Y on the Mac or Control Y on the PC, you'll see that as before, we can see every detail of every element of this shape. So now we want to apply this to our texture text. So what we can do is we can drag this on top. Let's make it a bit bigger just so it covers all of the lettering. And I'm going to make it black. And I'll need to switch back to the other view mode so you can see. So as you can see, I can change the color of this symbol now I've expanded it. Okay, so now what I can do is select both of these. So that's the text and the symbol that we've expanded itself. And I'm going to go over to the transparency palette, and I can then click Make Mask and untick the box that says Clip. And as you'll see, it's now applied this weathered grunge effect to our text. And like I said, you can do that to text and you can do it to images. And if you want to undo that, you can click this, go to the transparency palette and just click Release, and it will then separate those shapes back out. And that's how you can add texture to text or images using opacity masks in Adobe Illustrator. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how we can use the distortion functions in Illustrator to distort some text. Okay, so we're going to select our text tool here, and we're going to click and type distort. Let's make that a bit bigger, and we'll make it a bit bolder as well. Okay. And if we go to Object, Envelope Distort, and Make with Warp, what we do is we get a set of options pop up. So we've got Arc currently selected, and then you've got all these different ones. So it's definitely worth having a play with some of these. But you can switch how you want to distort it. And then if you have something like Arc, you can adjust the bend, how low it goes or how high it goes, and then how it works from left to right, and then from bottom to top. So another one you could use is bulge. And you really can use these to create some crazy effects in Adobe Illustrator. And you can have a lot of fun playing around with all these different effects. And then once you've got something that you're happy with, you can then select it, go to Object, Expand, select both Object and Fill, and then pressing Command Y on the Mac or Control Y on PC, you'll be able to see that it's now completed the effect. You can't go back and edit it any longer, but this is now the final shape. And that's how you distort text in Adobe Illustrator. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how you can add text to a path in Adobe Illustrator. So we're going to select our ellipse tool, and holding Shift, we're going to create a circle. And we're going to swap the fill and the stroke. And then we're going to hold down left on the text tool, and then go to type on a path. And click anywhere on the outline of the circle. And we can type our text here. And then if you press Command Y on the Mac and Control Y on the PC, you'll be able to see the shape again. And then if you select the direct selection tool up here at the start, you'll be able to see there's two arrows here, one pointing left and one pointing right. So if I make sure it's pointing left and left click, I can then move this text back and move it around the circle, or I can get the arrow that's pointing right and push it around to the right. But for now, I think I want it to line up. And what you can also do is go to View, Show Rulers, and then drag a ruler down to the bottom of the A. And then just go to View, Guides, and Show Guides so that it's visible. Okay. And we've got that. Let's get that arrow back. And we can just make sure that both the E and the A line up. So if I switch back to the other view and then hide our guides, we can see that we've got our text on a path, and the bottom of the A and the bottom of the E both line up. Now we've still got this circle here as part of it. Okay, so what we can do is, with this selected, just go up to Object, Expand, and with these two selected, just click OK. And now if you switch to the other view, you can see that it's removed any circle that was down here, and we're left with just the text. Okay, and that's how you add text to a path in Adobe Illustrator. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to create a stitched text effect in Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so if we select our type tool, and let's left click on the artboard, and we'll type the text stitched. And we'll just bring that up. Okay, and then what we're going to do is swap the fill and the stroke here. And we'll just zoom in a little bit more. And then with the text selected, we're going to go to the stroke palette and select dashed line. Okay, and we're going to have the dash at 10, and the gap, let's set that at 10 as well. Okay, so you can see it's starting to come together now. So let's make the gap a bit smaller. Okay, so now that's starting to look a bit more like a stitched effect. And one thing you can do is, if I zoom in so you can see, you can also change the cap to round cap. And this is just a personal preference, but sometimes it creates a more realistic stitching effect, and you can just bring the width down as well. But you can play around with those values until you're happy. But that's a really quick way to create a stitching effect. And then you can also still edit this. It's all editable, which is great. And you can keep it editable, or once you've finished, you can go to Type, Create Outlines. And then if you press Command Y on the Mac or Control Y on the PC, you'll see that it's made this text no longer editable anymore, and it is a shape. However, it doesn't replicate exactly what we see here. So one more step to do here will be to select this, go to Object, Expand, keep Fill and Stroke ticked, and click OK. And there we go. So now what we see is what our shape itself is as well. And this text is no longer editable, but you only really need to follow this step if you definitely don't want to edit your text anymore. Okay, that's how you create a stitched text effect in Adobe Illustrator. In this lesson, we're going to be taking a look at the Scribble Effect tool in Adobe Illustrator. Now this one's a lot of fun, and there's many different combinations you can make, and I'm just going to talk through a few of them now. Okay, so we'll start by creating a perfect circle holding Shift, and then what we're going to do is go up to Effect at the top, down to Stylize, and then where you see Scribble at the bottom. Click that, and you'll see at the moment it's selected with default, and there's many different settings here that you can adjust. And if you have the preview box ticked as well, you'll be able to see how it's going to affect your shape. Okay, so you can see by adjusting these sliders, it changes your shape quite considerably depending on what you select. And there's different scribble styles as well. So if I go down to childlike, you have something that looks like this. Loose, sketch, swash, zigzag, and I'll leave you to play around with all the different effects. But you can also have this as an outline. So if I select our circle here and I hold Shift to drag horizontally and Alt to create a copy, and then I'll swap the fill and the stroke round, you'll see that it applies this effect to the stroke. So if I select this one and go to the Appearance palette on the right, you can see it's got Scribble listed, and you can click that and you'll get your options back up. And we can go in and edit these again. And the same as these shapes, you can also do it with lettering. So if I type Scribble and bring this up in size, with it selected, again go up to Effect, down to Stylize, and click Scribble at the bottom. And you'll see it applies the scribble effect again to your lettering. And the great thing about this as well is that you can apply this scribble effect to your text, and you can still edit the text as well. So if I select something that's a bit more legible, you can see here that I can go in and this text is still editable. Okay, I'll leave you to have a play around with that one because it is a lot of fun, but that is the Scribble Effect tool in Adobe Illustrator.